Hi, my name is Nolan, and if you struggle with anxiety, you're at the right place. This presentation is going to be on anxiety management intervention, and it is supported by the Northwest Anxiety Institute, Professor Jordan Pennyfather, and Professor Shoshana Kriska. So anxiety is hard. We know this. When we give a speech, we expect perfection, and when we screw up, it's a nightmare situation. If you have social anxiety, it's whenever you're around a lot of people. If you have anxiety driving, it's when your experience is stopped from your fear of from driving, which is hard. It's also human. So one of the first things we do in these psychotherapy methods and through this intervention is we look at what anxiety feels like for each person. Generally, we don't have a panic attack 24/7. It just doesn't exist. What we have are these low points, and then as they peak, we have fear. At the top, we think, I can't handle this fear. And so we do something, a behavior, to bring it back down. The behavior could be coping with alcohol. It could be asking somebody for reassurance. It could be washing your hands, like in OCD. It could be ruminating, like PTSD. So that brings it down from its highest peak and gives us a form of safety. It's called a safety behavior. The problem is we end up relying on these safety behaviors because once the anxiety comes up again, we think, oh, now we have to act. And suddenly there's a thing you have to do to control yourself. And that one thing becomes two things, it becomes 5, it becomes 10. And in my experience, I used to spend more than 6 hours a day because I have OCD, doing self-checks, and I took 16 credits at that same time, so I wasn't getting a lot of sleep. And that 6 hours was exhausting. I mean, it's not fun, and it's not something I do now. It's not, if you can relate, it's not something that you have to continue, which is awesome. How do we not continue this cycle? Well, when you get to that peak, you let yourself feel the fullness of the anxiety. You diffuse the situation by being vulnerable, and you say, all right, bring it on. What's next? I'm gonna have a panic attack. My anxiety is gonna skyrocket and my heart's gonna stop, or whatever fear that you've built up in your head that stopped you, just let it sit there and see how you feel. And through enough practice, you may find, like most do, that you can handle it. And then when you are at that peak, suddenly you don't have to have a behavior to change how you feel. You just know that you can handle it. You can handle whatever situation is thrown at you. So, in a way, it's a lot like jumping into cold water and getting used to the temperature. It's called diffusion. It's best done through exposure therapy. So, we're gonna take a look at that next. Exposure therapy is a method of ranking anxiety points on a specific theme and becoming better at each one of those points. So, for example, let's say I have a fear of driving. I'm anxious every time I get in the car because I think that the oncoming lane on the left side on a one-way highway is gonna hit me, and it's gonna be tough. Like of course I'm going to be anxious about that. It's very understandable. But how do we feel better about driving? Because I don't want to live my whole life in a tough shell where I'm feel like I'm going to have a heart attack every time I step in a car. It's not going to happen. Or I don't want it to. So what do? I make a list of 1 to 10. 1 being anxiety points, and I'll describe what that is, that aren't as pressing, don't cause as much anxiety in me. Like a 1 is easy for me to do, and a 10 is really hard. Would cause a panic attack, is like the hardest thing I can think of. And these anxiety points just become things to do. So a 1 is like, all right, to get in my car and sit in the car in my garage for 5-10 minutes. Yeah, I can sit. I can do that. That doesn't have anxiety, but it's on the scale because the car is part of this. Okay, and then what's a 3? A 3 is driving around the block. It's a little more. I'm in it, but it's also a safe environment, and I've done this a million times, and great. And so I practice that. All right, let's do a 7. Now the range of 5 to 7 is awesome because this is where you test yourself without putting yourself in perceived risk. How does this look? It could, if depending on the severity of the anxiety, be driving around the block and thinking about getting hit by other cars. That can be one thing. Or maybe it's driving for an amount of time. So 20-30 minutes with no music on. And so your mind isn't as busy, and you can handle it, but maybe it causes more distress and more tough thoughts, right? So you practice this over and over again, and suddenly that 7 becomes a 6, it becomes a 5, and then you just don't have as much anxiety. You're diffusing the whole thing, and what happens is your 10, which is driving on a 1-lane highway where the intersection's super close, it turns into a 9 and an 8 and a 7 just because you're practicing anxiety. It's all about practicing anxiety because that is the thing that we're getting better at. So exposure therapy is using 1 anxiety point and getting used to it. By doing so, the anxiety of all your distresses in this theme come down. And again, you can do this for social anxiety. You can do it for insomnia. You can do it for dependence on substance. You can do it for eating disorders. Anything involved with anxiety, fear, addiction, OCD, PTSD, hoarding, general anxiety disorder, panic disorder, all these things can be helped through exposure therapy. And it breaks the loop. That's the best part. When I think about the loop of protecting ourselves from anxiety and refusing to be vulnerable, I'm reminded of a leech. Think of your anxiety as a leech. It sits on your shoulder and it will eat as much as it can. You can choose to give it smaller portions of your time, your day, or you can let it just sit there and grow. OCD is different because every anxiety disorder is different, but it all lies under the threat of anxiety, of perceived fear that isn't an actual threat. It's just what we're preparing for, what we're thinking. On a small side note, we definitely don't want to do anything dangerous, or too easy. So you want to stay within the middle area. If you had a driving anxiety disorder, you don't want to close your eyes on the highway. That's just not the goal of this, because that is threat. But what isn't threat is driving on the highway and thinking, all right, I'm gonna get hit right now. And you're still driving and it's fine. And suddenly, when you have that thought, it doesn't destroy your day and make you not want to ever drive on the highway again. That's a tough place to be, to limit yourself. Don't limit yourself. You could be better. And it takes time, so the path to health is not linear. It's up and down, and we relapse. It's not a great word. We aren't perfect, and we were never meant to be. So let's just do our best. And if you're having a tough time cognitively, let's say your mind is racing, you can't feel like you can slow it down, then I like to think of thoughts as either leaves in a stream, and we're either like obsessing on this thought that we are looking at. It's a leaf that we've picked up and we can't get it away from our face, so we just need to do something that can allow us to let it go down the river. Or you can also think of it as being in a snow globe, and you have this shaken up energy, right? All of these little snowflakes, these thoughts are spinning around. You can't do anything about it, but like in every snow globe, it always settles to the bottom at some point. So we got to think of things like time. We need to be mindful of ourselves, of our lives, of the space that we have that we're not giving ourselves. So if you're overwhelmed, just remember you could sleep, eat, and wake up tomorrow to do the same thing again, but feel better next time, or not. No, you'll feel better. So yeah, anxiety management interventions are awesome. And if I could give 3 major takeaways, I would say practice what applies to you, and take breaks when you need to, but try to improve and make goals that are attainable and that you can see and that matter to you. And why do they matter? Practicing exposure therapy like every day, just like a workout. It can get exhausting, but you'll get better at it, and you'll be able to respond in your life to these stressful events and not close yourself off, because vulnerability is our goal. And if you have a panic attack, that's tough, but use mindfulness and focus on the greater goal. This is diffusion. It is hard, and nothing's killed you yet. So you got it. And I would say that's the sum of the information that I'm describing today, but please reach out if you have any questions. I'm going to be working on this for quite a while, so I always love talking about it. I always love sharing more information, and let me know if you have any comments. Thank you.